Dynasty won't be seen tonight, so we can bring you a very special episode of The Gen X Files. Welcome to The Gen X Files. I'm Jim.
I'm Adam.
And today's show is all about
G.I. Joe.
American hero. G.I. Joe's there.
It's always amazing when we start singing and I realize I can't sing at all.
Go Joe! You can sing, actually.
I can't.
You can.
I can't
You have a
carry-
beautiful voice.
I can't carry tune.
You can do the high parts really well.
Oh, thanks, man.
You do.
I'm
We just need to harmonize. Maybe if we practice for 2 seconds.
yeah.
G.I. Joe! Yeah, baby. Go Joe!
Excited about G.I. Joe. It's going to be an interesting episode because you played with the early ones and I played with the later ones.
Yeah, I got some interesting memories about those old Joes and how they were disposed of.
Fun.
Yeah. No, G.I. Joe is... It is amazing because up until then, boys didn't play with dolls.
Yeah.
And according to my stepdad, boys shouldn't play with dolls at all.
Yeah.
But
A lot of stepdads back in the day felt that way.
action figures changed the way kids played, man.
Yeah.
Action figures, you're not dolls. If I had a nickel for every time I said, they're not dolls, they're action figures. My guys are action figures. I'd be super rich right now.
Yeah.
But it completely changed the way we play.
Yeah.
Because kids could, boys before, it was all like sports and guns and, roughhousing and stuff, which is great.
Yeah.
But I think getting these little guys, especially, at least for me, and this was mostly my Star Wars guys, but you opened up your imagination. You created adventures and you created, all these different scenarios for you guys. And I think it was really great. Of course, it's a war thing, but that's how it has to be.
Yeah.
Boys like guns and army guys and all that stuff.
Yeah, but I didn't focus on the war part of it. Part of the reason that I came to LA and came to Hollywood was because I created stories for my G.I. Joe figures.
Sure.
I was 8, 9 years old and I was creating these long, elaborate stories to the point where my brother would literally stop playing with me.
Well, yeah,
because he was like, this is too complicated.
Well, all of your G.I. Joes were part of the USO, and they had to put on this show, and there was so much backstage infighting.
It was just
in
a
your
lot
scenarios.
of guys in Jeeps driving away from the fight. My brother would be like, what are you doing? But it was great. I mean, it sparked my imagination. I didn't focus as much on the war part. I mean, obviously they were, and they would. It's really about good and evil and fighting bad guys and all that.
Well, the Joe that I had, the thing that was so much fun were these action packs. You get like the scuba guy action pack.
Yeah,
It was basically, I know we'll get into it, but it's basically like the same thing as the Barbie accessory pack.
Yeah.
But it had guns and flippers and stuff.
It just was much more boy-oriented.
Tents and weird vehicles and all sorts of stuff. I mean, it was really a really quality product.
Yeah, it was. Well, take yourself back, 1964. May 12th, 12 young men in New York City publicly burned their draft cards to protest the Vietnam War, the first such act of war resistance.
Yeah, that was brave, man.
1964, way sooner than I thought it happened.
Yeah.
I thought it happened much later in the 60s. August 7th, the United States Congress passes the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, giving U.S. President Lyndon B. Johnson broad war powers to deal with North Vietnamese attacks on U.S. forces.
I feel like I should have been doing the JFK, Oliver Stone. And then the Vietnam War took over.
December 11th, Che Guevara addresses the United Nations General Assembly. A bazooka attack is launched at the headquarters of the United Nations in New York City.
Go Joe!
Yeah, it's the fact that it's specified it being a bazooka is really funny.
Yeah, man. Well, that's a serious attack.
That is.
Bazookas do damage.
They do.
You ever, especially Bazooka Joe, you ever try to chew that gum, man?
Oh, my
That'll
God.
Cut your mouth up like nobody's.
Break your teeth.
Yeah, it's like hard, chalky razor blades.
Yeah, I always liked the comics that came with Bazooka Joe.
Everybody did. And nobody got it for the gum.
The little message at the bottom was, "Help, I'm trapped in a gum factory."
Yeah.
It's always my favorite. At some point during 1964, G.I. Joe, America's Movable Fighting Man is released.
At some point.
All
records have been
I could
lost.
not find any actual date
Really?
of when it was released, So G.I.
Classified, Adam.
Yeah.
Classified.
Apparently. Well, he's America's Movable Fighting Man.
He is.
G.I. Joe starts with Stanley Weston. He was an inventor. He attended New York University before enlisting in the United States Army during the Korean War. He returned to New York City after the war and completed his master's degree at New York University. Shortly after completing his master's degree, Weston joined a relatively new emerging segment of the retail and entertainment industries known as licensing and merchandising.
Yeah, here we go.
Yeah. He became a licensing agent who oversaw branding negotiations for Soupy Sales and Twiggy during the 1960s.
Yeah, they made these Twiggy dolls, from the model, but they kept losing them because they just slipped through anything. They were so skinny. And the Soupy Sales doll, ooh.
Oh, yeah.
It was soupy.
Weston became interested in a possible military toy line from frequent trips to an Army-Navy surplus store in New York City, as well as the military articles in the Encyclopedia Britannica.
Here's Stanley Weston again, coming into our Army surplus store.
Carrying around his Encyclopedia Britannica.
Taking notes. He never buys anything. Either buy something or get out, Stanley. I'm sick of you.
He'd be that guy in the corner reading the encyclopedia.
What's up with that guy?
Joy at parties.
Stanley Weston. If you weren't a good inventor.
Weston also scoured thrift stores for military uniforms and paraphernalia. Unlike most toy lines, Weston created G.I. Joe without a backstory, specific enemy, or mission.
Well, that seems kind of lazy.
Well, yeah. Weston made rudimentary prototypes of the figure and basic marketing materials that showed the sales potential of a military action figure.
You know where he found the inspiration for the figure was the modeling figures.
Yeah, that's what he used.
Yeah, he went and bought a bunch of modeling figures from like a art store.
Like the life drawing figure things, the little wooden guys. Yeah, yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah, he literally made his own uniforms and then dressed them up and then like painted faces on them and stuff and was like, look, these can sell.
I just see him with his little needle and thread, like, tiny little vests and making, I got to double stitch this one. They're going to see, my toys. It wasn't named G.I. Joe then. He just called them my army guys. My army guys are going to set the world on fire.
He was the first person to create military stories with his weird army figures.
Don't call them dolls.
When he showed these materials to Donald Levine, a Hasbro executive, Levine told Weston,
"You will make a fortune with these."
Weston subsequently licensed the entire concept to Hasbro for $100,000.
Yeah, they offered him $50,000 and 1% royalties on everything, or a $100,000 buyout.
Well, he should have taken the 1%.
Well, but it's always easy.
Do you know what the sales were in 1989 of G.I. Joe?
Yeah,
they were over $2 billion.
Yeah, well, his family would have been rich for the rest of their lives. But it's hindsight's 2020. Sure. $100,000 was a lot of money back then.
I'm sure he did a lot with it.
Yeah, but it's that. Man, there's always just those wedgie inducing, where you're just like, the bad decision.
It was $50,000. I would have taken it with the 1%. But
Yeah, well, you don't have a family, Adam.
That's true.
Maybe he had some braces or something they had to get for his kid.
Probably. The conventional marketing wisdom of the early 1960s was that boys would not play with dolls, or were not allowed to, and parents would not buy their sons dolls, which would have been traditionally a girl's toy.
I know. It's just so weird. It wasn't even that long ago, but it was just so like, boys play with balls, and girls play with dolls, and that's the way it is, and that's the way it all shall be.
This is what started the whole boys will be boys thing. I mean, it's awful. Thus, the word doll was never used by Hasbro or anyone involved in the development of marketing of G.I. Joe.
Didn't they fine you if you used the word doll there?
I don't know. That's possible.
I think I heard that you had to pay a fine if you used doll instead of action.
Whatever. Action figure was the only acceptable term and has since become the generic description for any posable doll intended for boys.
I know. How great would it be to be the guy that came up with action figure? And that's a really cool name.
It is. It works really well. It's good marketing. Yeah.
Hey, nobody wants the boy playing with a dolly, but an action figure.
Well, it's just action figure is so. I mean, you're supposed to play with it. Like it's supposed to be played with.
It 100% is a good moniker because it is exactly what it is.
Right.
It's a figure made for action.
It is true.
America's movable fighting man
is a registered trademark of Hasbro and was prominently displayed on every boxed figure package. The Hasbro prototypes were originally named
Rocky,
the Marine Soldier,
Skip,
the Sailor, And
Ace.
the pilot.
Nice. Rocky, Skip, and Ace.
It sounds like they'd be in a gay club somewhere.
You know what? They are.
Before the more universal name G.I. Joe was adopted, they actually had individual names. One of the prototypes would later sell in a heritage auction in 2003 for $200,001.
Ugh, that's that one guy that was like, $200,001. And then the guy was like, I can't do 200,002. That'll break me. What a jerk.
An African-American figure was introduced in 1965, though it was simply the same face as the white figure painted brown.
Creative, guys. Nice. Well, I mean, at least it's a little bit of progress.
Yeah, and they're trying. They're trying. The initial product offering featured members of the 4 branches of the armed forces:
Action soldier, action sailor, action pilot, and action marine.
With accessory sets immediately available for each branch.
Oh, that's the thing. The accessory sets were brilliant, man.
Oh, yeah.
Because you could get like tents, like bivouacs, you could get like machine gun nests, but you could also get like your frogman guy. Or your infiltrator guy, and he came with like a beanie and, like a knife and stuff. And it was like you had all of these great outfits. And yet, you didn't have any bad guys or anything to fight against. It was just, I would basically grab my sister's Barbies and Kens, and they would kill them. It was like, I don't know what was going on there. Some sort, I guess they were like that, the Americans, you know. I guess I found Barbie and Ken were like secret Russian spies, and I had to go in.
Yeah.
Rip all the heads off my sister's Barbies. Oh, she hated me. Hated it.
It was correctly assumed that competitors would try to emulate or outright copy the concept, so the idea was to offer a broad range of accessory items from the very start.
Oh, and they did.
Yeah. Aside from the obvious trademarking on the right buttock, other aspects of the figure were copyrighted features that allowed Hasbro to successfully pursue cases against producers of cheap imitations, since the human figure itself cannot be copyrighted or trademarked.
Right.
The scar on the right cheek was an example.
Oh, yeah, man.
Oh, yeah. Another, unintentional at first, was the placement of the right thumbnail on the underside of the thumb.
Yeah, he was deformed.
He was.
I'm surprised he even got in the armed forces with that deformity.
How?
Seems like it would be hard to, like, your thumb would keep slipping off your gun with the nail underneath. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, but, you know, it was Vietnam. Like, they needed soldiers. So.
I know. By the way, I never had any of these G.I. Joes.
The original ones, yeah.
I didn't. We're coming up to my brand.
Yeah.
The hairy kung fu grips.
Right. The ongoing situation in Vietnam and the growing anti-war sentiment of the late 60s signaled the end of the early years of G.I. Joe.
The first G.I. Joes are kind of like... They look like elves on a shelf, kind of. They're very boyish. They're very, like, soft looking. They don't look like tough guys, you know.
Yeah.
They look kind of like Kens in you know.
Yeah.
In army clothes.
Yeah.
But then they got with the scar and stuff. They got a little bit more.
Yeah. And they did the fuzzy hair and the beards and stuff.
When that stuff came, then they were like,
it was full on.
They're a bunch of dirty dozens.
By 1969, G.I. Joe was no longer a soldier, sailor, pilot, marine, but rather an adventurer. He was marketed under the
Adventures of G.I. Joe.
The line consisted of
Adventurer, Black Adventurer, Aquanaut, and Talking Astronaut.
Instead of military sets, the mostly recycled materials from earlier years were given names such as
Fight for Survival, Danger of the Depths, Mysterious Explosion, Secret Mission to Spy Island, and Mouth of Doom.
Mouth of Doom?
Yes, he had really bad breath.
All right.
You got a mouth of doom, buddy. You better brush them teeth.
By the late 1960s, in the wake of the Vietnam War, Hasbro sought to downplay the war theme that initially defined G.I. Joe.
Yeah, during this time, like a little bit after this time, I remember having like these G.I. Joe read-along records. Do you remember those? Did you ever have those?
No.
It was like it came with a book and a record, and you would put the record on, and I'm basically explaining read-along records.
Yeah,
pretty much self-explanatory, but it would have a story, and it would have like sound effects. It was really like an absorbing kind of reading, whatever.
Okay.
And so these Joes, like I remember, they had like these cool jumpsuits, like different colored jumpsuits with like silver belts and stuff.
Oh.
And like these white holes. They didn't look like they were adventurers. They were like they weren't. I remember it wasn't like, you know, the other GI Joes, which were the army guys and the guys with
actual military dudes,
which were the first ones that I got. But these guys were more
They were the adventure team.
Yeah, man.
Highlights of the line included lifelike flocked hair and beard, an innovation developed in England by Palitoy for their licensed version of Joe, Action Man.
They all burned their draft cards, too, the adventurers. It was weird.
These were introduced in 1970. A retooled African-American adventure was also introduced, which came in 2 versions, as did the others in the series, bearded or shaven.
Okay.
In 1974, named after the increasingly popular martial art, Hasbro introduced Kung Fu Grip to the G.I. Joe line.
The Kung Fu Grip, man. That, to this day, is still something.
Brilliant.
Everybody knows the Kung Fu Grip. It has nothing to do with Kung Fu.
No.
I mean, look, I'm not a Kung Fu master. I have never said I was a Kung Fu master, Adam.
Yeah, no one's ever accused you of being a Kung Fu
never.
master.
If you would see me on the street, you wouldn't be like, that guy's a Kung Fu master.
He knows Kung Fu.
But I know there's no Kung Fu grip that you learn. The greatest thing was you would take the grip and you'd grip your other Joe and you'd flip him over, and that would be Kung Fu.
Kung Fu, yeah. This was another innovation that had been developed in the UK for Action Man. The hands were molded in a softer plastic that allowed the fingers to grip objects in a more lifelike fashion.
Very cool. And they also came up with the hair, too, in Britain, didn't they? Yeah, all the innovations. Those Brits loved their action figures.
They did. The polymer used, however, broke down quickly, which caused the end of the thumb and fingertips to break off after a few weeks.
Oh, and no deformed thumb this time.
Oh, yeah. Well, how would you grip anybody with a deformed thumb?
But they all had what they did, because the hands would crumble.
Right.
They put a little thing in that during their adventures in certain parts of Africa, these Joes got leprosy.
They would get leprosy.
Yeah, and that's why their fingers started falling.
Wow,
off.
that's sad.
It was sad. It wasn't fun to play with your leprosy dolls, because then you'd have to go to the leper colony.
Excuse me? You mean leprosy action figures?
Leprosy action figures. Then there was like the G.I. Joe Adventure Leprosy Colony.
No.
And you just had these needles you would put in all of their backs as treatment. There was
an accessory set called Night of the Lepers.
Yes. It was weird and sad, but it was the 70s.
It was. Everything was weird and sad.
Yes. And everything was avocado and orange.
Yes. In 1976, G.I. Joe was given eagle eye vision, a movable eye mechanism to allow the toy to appear to be looking around when a lever on the back of the head was moved.
Yeah, it was cool.
It's weird. This would be the last major innovation for the original line of 12-inch figures. For its first 10 years, G.I. Joe was a generic soldier adventurer with only the slightest hints of a team concept existing. In 1975, after a failed bid to purchase the toy rights to the $6 Million Man, Hasbro issued a bionic warrior figure, Mike Power Atomic Man.
Mike Power Atomic Man. Hi, I'm Mike Power.
1 million units of Mike Power Atomic Man were sold.
That's not bad.
That is amazing.
That's a lot of Mike Powers.
Guy named Mike Power.
I had the $6 million
man. Yeah.
That was the coolest, because you could look through its eye.
Oh,
and it would had a little little telescope.
Eyesight. Oh, yeah.
So you could see like his special vision.
That's holding. Yeah.
And then it had this thing where you like on his back go chook, 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 and it would lift up an engine.
Oh, wow.
And then you could peel up his skin on his arm, and there'd be like 2 little microchip things you could take out of his arm. And same thing with his leg. Yeah, you could take out these microchips.
Oh, weird.
Oh, that was my favorite. Ooh, Joe was dead after Steve Austin came out, man.
Oh, yeah. Also added to the adventure team was a superhero, Bullet Man. This character had recurring enemies, the Intruders, strongmen from another world.
Yeah.
Comics included with figures at the time featured Eagle-Eye Joe, Atomic Man, and Bullet Man operating together, and the adventure team finally became an actual team.
Good, finally. They've been working on it so hard, man.
They did.
And it took a lot of therapy, but they finally became a team.
The original 12-inch G.I. Joe line ended in America in 1976.
Yeah?
They stopped selling it. My Uncle Ben had some of these, and I remember when I was growing up, he's the one that's like maybe 12 years older than me.
Yeah.
But I remember playing he had the fuzzy beards and stuff, and I just thought it was so weird that they had the weird fuzzy hair.
I loved my G.I. Joes, and my stepdad hated the fact that I played with dolls. They're not dolls, they're action figures. But he would like...
Would you always affect the New York accent?
Oh, I would. And that would even drive him crazier. He's like, you were born in Boston, dummy.
I'm kind of siding with your stepdad
Please
now.
Be regional. He would do stuff like your Jeep floated. Your G.I. Joe big Jeep floated. So we would put a G.I. Joe in the Jeep, put it in the pool, and then he would make me shoot at it.
Oh.
With, which... He didn't make me shoot at it. I really liked it. But he was trying to train me to hate dolls. So he had me shoot at it. So he would do these things to try to make me not like the dolls.
Right.
Didn't work because I love my action figures. So one day I had this like really cool, not a suitcase, but this really cool kind of like trunk kind of thing that I kept all my Joes in.
Yeah.
You know, and I had a good collection of Joes. I came home from school one day and it was gone. And I went to the stepdad, where are my Joes? And he said, the dump. And I was like, what? And he's like, you're too old to play with dolls. I think I was 7 or 8, 6 or 7 at the time, because this was in the 70s.
Yeah.
This was before they got rid of them. I was so heartbroken, man.
Yeah.
And not just that, but I had a good collection. If those Joes were still around,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
but that was just so mean.
Yeah.
And then, you know, and then I was like, you know, luckily he didn't get my Steve Austin. I still had that one.
Oh, yeah.
And then, you know, when the Star Wars came out, there's nothing he could do.
Right.
You know, those action figures. At least they were small enough that it didn't look like I was playing dress up with them. I think with him, it was the whole dress up thing.
They just looked a little, yeah.
And I was really like, I also had these dolls called Big Jim, the Big Jim line.
Okay.
And the thing about them is they had these muscles that you would put this this metallic like band around his bicep, and when you flexed it, it would pop the band off because his muscles were really flexed.
Nice.
And he was like the Mego sized. He was like the medium
like
size.
4-inch kind of high.
Well, yeah, like
little higher.
like 6 or 7, I think.
Okay.
And then, but I remember playing with my Big Jims with my mom and my sister, and my mom like put this rad outfit on one of the Big Jims, and I was like, well, this one's mine now. And so I was like, from a very young age, I was always into costumes and always into you know, aesthetics.
Yeah.
And so I think what really bothered the old man was how, you know, I was very particular about the outfits that my action figures wore. So I think the Star Wars was less disgusting to him because I couldn't change any outfits or whatever.
They didn't have clothes, yeah.
Oh, he was a toughie.
It's funny that you still now, when playing video games, you still are very particular about your outfits.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's the whole thing. Customization. I love it. That's all part of it. You know, it's really fun to... That's why I love Grand Theft Auto Online, because it's like having an action figure.
It is.
You know, you've got your guns and your accessories and your cars and your clothes. And
GTA is the closest I've come to how I played with my G.I. Joes when I was growing up.
that, and then, you know, I mean, we'll get into it next week, but you know, with the video games or Legos too. It's again, just like playing with Legos. It's cool because you get to cheat. Like I would love to buy a Lego Millennium Falcon and put it together and hang it in the room or something, but I can't justify spending $300 on a Legos, but I can fly around in a Lego one for much less money.
Right.
You know, so it's a way for me to kind of cheat the system and still be able to play with toys without actually buying toys. That's why I love video games.
Yeah. In 1977, Hasbro released the Super Joe Adventure Team and took the battle between good and evil to the stars.
Nice.
The figures were scaled down to 8.5 inches, similar in size to Mego's Superheroes line of action figures.
Those are another ones that I had. I had all those Migos, man.
Yeah.
I even... this is the one that you would love. I had all of the Planet of the Apes Migos
with
the action
the treehouse
house
set or whatever.
I think I've said this before, but my mom was all up night setting it up and had all the action figures set up on it, and it was ready to play. I just got under the tree and just started playing. F all the rest of the presents, baby. I'm on the Planet of the Apes.
Your mom was awesome.
She still is.
She is awesome.
My mom is awesome.
Is awesome. Sorry, that was an awesome thing for her to do. That's
she always made things special. I'm going to tell you one quick story about my mom, and I might have told this before, so please bear with me. But one of the really fun things that my sister and I always bring up with my mom is there used to be this Hostess commercial where this mom came out with a tray that had Hostess pies, Hostess Twinkies, and Ding Dongs on it. Mm-hmm. And she would come out and say, "Hostess anyone?" And the kids would be like, me, and they would run up in the Hostess, whatever. So somehow, I don't even know how we did it, but we convinced my mom to go out and buy the treats, put them all on a tray, walk through the door, open up the door. We had the door closed. We had the whole thing presented like it was a play. God. And she opened up the door and would say, "Hostess anyone?" And then we were like, yeah, us, we. It was just so much. That was what was great. She was always game and so much fun, and she still is.
Yeah. The line of the Super Joe Adventure Team was a hybrid of superhero and space action figures with new features incorporated, such as battery-powered backpack lights and motorized accessories.
Ooh.
Yeah, the hero Super Joe characters, Super Joe Commander and Super Joe, had a 1-2 punch that could be activated by pressing panels on the figure's back. I don't know if it got confusing for them since they were Super Joe and Super Joe Commander.
Yeah, well, Super Joe Commander was always in charge.
Well, yeah. The majority of these figures use Kung Fu grip-style plastic in the joints and hands, but with age, the material degraded, leaving even unopened figures missing limbs and hands.
Again, they could not cure the leprosy, even for Super Joe.
It's rampant.
They needed
leprosy.
They needed Dr. Joe to come in.
They did. Super Joe Doctor?
And give him treatments.
Unlike the original G.I. Joe collection, the Super Joe collection was developed from the start with a play pattern of good versus evil.
Super Joe Commander and the Adventure Team.
Man of action and adventure with their alien comrades.
The Night Fighters, Luminos, and the Shield fight against the evil Gore, king of the Terrans. Terran, the beast from beyond, and his orange-eyed ally Darkon, the half-man, half-monster.
The action figure was the same as the Super Joe Commander, but molded in a dark green plastic and with a different set of accessories.
Right, exactly. He's green. So he's
green.
Bad.
So he's bad. Well, he's dark green. That's
Oh.
universally the evil color. As with the previous series, various accessory costume packs were sold for the Super Joe line, including several that were powered by the Commander's light vest via a jack to the battery pack.
Yeah, I remember this. They had these black, skin tight suits.
I don't remember these at all.
I think I had this one, and they had this chest device that had a light on it that would light up. Yeah, I had this one.
Most of the non-powered packs were updated versions of previous G.I. Joe packs, some of which were simply used the same accessories without scaling them down for the smaller figure.
Big-ass guns. It didn't really fit. I was like, come on, lazies.
Yeah. Super Joe was discontinued by the end of 1978. The same basic body molds were later used by a subsidiary of Hasbro to produce a line of action figures based on the TV series Space Academy.
Yeah, and this was right about the time when the Star Wars figures were hitting.
Yes.
And they would change everything.
Yeah. It was right around this time, yeah. A Real American Hero was brought about as a revival of the original 12-inch G.I. Joe brand of the 1960s and 1970s. After the 12-inch figure had been absent from toy shelves for a few years, G.I. Joe was introduced in a 3 3/4-inch action figure format following the success of the Star Wars and Micronauts 3 3/4-inch scale toy lines.
Oh, did you ever have Micronauts?
I did. I
They
had a
were
couple.
so cool.
Yeah. It was weird to me because I thought they were just like Star Wars knockoffs, so I wasn't as interested in them.
But they were all clear, and they had those chest plates.
Yeah,
and all those
yeah.
Weird,
I mean, it was its own thing.
Yeah.
I was young and was like, these are stupid.
Oh man, the Micronauts! I love the Micronauts.
Yeah, there was a whole comic book line and everything.
Oh, it was awesome. They had silver heads, and they had
They were
these
super
cool little
weird.
hands.
Yeah.
And you could take the hand. They had the wrist cuff, and the little hand moved around inside the cuff like a ball joint.
Yeah.
But not like any other thing. And you could pop off the hands and switch hands. Like, oh, I want black hands on this guy. And
Right.
that was the cool thing about it is you could switch all the parts on the dudes.
Right.
Oh, they were cool. I think I still have a Micronaut somewhere.
I think the main reason that I wasn't as interested in Micronauts was because it didn't have a movie or a TV show.
Yeah.
It wasn't. I think there might have been. It was based on a Japanese line or something.
I don't remember. I just know it was so
But
cool.
all I know is that I loved Star Wars because of the movies.
Yeah.
I knew what the movies were, so I wanted to play with the characters in the movies, and which would become very indicative later with G.I. Joe and Real American Hero.
G.I. Joe.
The genesis of the toy line. The genesis of the toy line came about from a chance meeting in a men's room, according to Jim Shooter, then editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics.
Jim Shooter. The president and CEO of Hasbro was at a charity event that Marvel's president was also at. They ended up in the men's room standing next to each other, peeing, and I think that's how they met. They were talking about each other's respective businesses, and it came up that Hasbro wanted to reactivate the trademark on G.I. Joe, but they were trying to come up with a new approach. Marvel's guy was like, we have the best creative people in the world. Let me bring in this editor-in-chief of mine, and we'll fix it for you.
Prior to G.I. Joe's launch in 1982, Larry Hama was developing an idea for a new comic book called Fury Force, which he was hoping would be an ongoing series for Marvel Comics.
Yeah, he was on MASH.
Yeah,
Larry
he was an
Hama.
actor, yeah.
He was a lot of things. He was also a vet.
He also made Wolverine very popular.
Really?
Yeah. I want to say that he might have actually created... comic book nerds are going to lambaste me for this, but I'm pretty sure he had something to do with the originations of Wolverine.
Nice. Well, he seems like a really cool dude. He had a lot of different
he was fascinating.
things going on.
Yeah. The original premise had the son of S.H.I.E.L.D. director Nick Fury assembling a team of elite commandos to battle neo-Nazi terrorist Hydra. Shooter approached Hama about the Joe project due to Hama's military background, and the Fury concept was adapted for the project. Shooter suggested to Hasbro that G.I. Joe should be the team name and that they should fight terrorists, while Archie Goodwin invented Cobra and the Cobra Commander. Everything else was created by Hama.
Oh, yeah.
Hasbro was initially uncertain about making villain toys, believing this would not sell. I think they wanted you to play kind of like you did. You would make your other toys the villains.
Yeah.
So you would attack your sister's
whole
Barbies
thing.
or whatever.
I mean, that was the natural
yeah.
progression because you didn't have...
There was no bad guys.
Yeah, it's not like because who wants to buy a bunch of Nazi dolls or whatever for their... I mean, I'm sure there's some people that would.
Yeah.
Yay. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I get it. But it's like, but Star Wars had the villain guys.
Yeah. You had to.
Because
I mean, it was the movie.
That was
you
the
had
first
to.
time that you really had, good guys and bad guys to play off of. And you
Yeah.
would get 3 or 4 Stormtrooper figures.
Right.
To even out.
Or
the sides.
120 like I did.
Oh, that'd be
I'm
so
just
cool.
kidding. I didn't do that.
But yeah, I mean, I would take over the whole room and make different
Yeah.
planets. And the old man would get so pissed because I would use the receiver as like the base, like the Death Star before I got the Death Star playset, and I would use the the equalizer things as elevators, and the guys would be like, so I would change all the settings because they would be going up and down on these elevators.
Oh man, I would be pissed about that.
Yeah, well, hey, should have encouraged my imagination.
Yeah. Marvel would also suggest the inclusion of female Joes in the toy line and to include them with the vehicles, as Hasbro again worried they would not sell on their own.
Put the broads with the vehicles. Nobody's going to buy them.
Yeah.
I bought a Princess Leia.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It's one of those.
I'm looking at her right now.
I think at the time, general consensus was kind of like, okay, well, girls don't want to play with this stuff.
Boys were blue and girls were pink.
Yeah,
that's what it was.
yeah.
That's how it was. There was no, exploring
I mean,
your feelings and all that stuff. It was just boys play with boy stuff, girls play with girl stuff.
That was the general consensus, and no one really bucked that trend. I mean, nobody was fighting against it. It was that's just what it was.
And it was oppressive, yeah. And yeah, I mean, boys wanted to play with other stuff and girls wanted to play with G.I. Joes,
Sure.
and they did, and good. But it's like there was such like a ridiculous sexist BS with everything when it came to kids,
Permeated everything. Yeah,
exactly.
It was awful. It was decided that the comic book series itself would be advertised on television first, as opposed to advertising the toys directly for the time being.
At least they made, at least they made the female characters soldiers and stuff instead of like, she's the nurse and the G.I. Joe secretary.
And she's the cook.
Yeah, exactly.
And she comes with her own action vacuum.
Action pots and pans.
Yeah. This was because television advertising for toys were subject to strict regulations, such as how long an advertisement could depict a toy in animation.
Oh, the good old days when they actually cared about children's brains.
The regulations for literary creation were much more lax, allowing them to depict animation for the entire advertisement when they were advertising the comic book, but not the toys.
So that was...
Which doesn't make any sense at all.
No, it doesn't. It's just a weird loophole, but it was brilliant. It was brilliant that they went in and had them create the comic book story, because that creates an automatic play script.
Exactly.
Oh, I got to get these toys because I want to play this.
Right.
And by doing the comic book as the Trojan horse into the plastic fantastic, it was brilliant because they could really push the comic book, but what they were really doing is pushing the toys. It was brilliant.
It was very good marketing.
There's a lot of creativity in terms of production and marketing. In the G.I. Joe story, that's what makes it so cool. Is all of these like little, it's just such a it seems like such a ragtag kind of dirty dozen kind of toy. It's pretty cool.
Each G.I. Joe figure included a character biography called a file card.
File card. You can cut them out.
Yeah, Larry Hama was largely responsible for writing these file cards, especially for the first 10 years. When developing many of the characters, he drew much from his own experiences in the U.S. military.
You know, can I tell you like a funny thing about the cards? So originally they were supposed to release the G.I. Joe line at an earlier date, but because of Empire Strikes Back and those toys, they decided to wait a year.
Oh, yeah.
And it was within that year that Hama wrote the cards. Like,
so he wrote all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So all this stuff wouldn't have come out if the toy originally came out when it came out.
Right,
but because they had, instead of just, waiting for it to come out, they, refined
Right.
and did stuff to build up the toy in that year. So that's, thank George Lucas for that.
Yeah. The overall premise for the toy line revolves around an elite counter-terrorist team codenamed G.I. Joe, whose main purpose is
to defend human freedom against Cobra, a ruthless terrorist organization determined to rule the world.
Yeah. Every year, Hasbro and Marvel would meet up to discuss the upcoming toys and marketing.
Yeah, serious.
Yeah, Larry Hama was given free reign by Marvel's editors.
That must have been great.
Both the toys and the comics would become a great success, the comics being Marvel Comics' most subscribed title at one point, but Jim Shooter has said sister company Marvel Productions, who handled the cartoon, overspent on production and had a critical success but a financial disaster with the show.
Yeah.
Yeah. The first 11 characters were introduced in carded packs while 4 others were bundled with vehicles.
Yeah, all the also-rans.
Yeah. The first series of action figures had straight arms with elbow joints. While it was common for many characters to share the same mold for producing a body part, it was much more noticeable in the first year. As for the original 13 G.I. Joe figure, only 6 head molds were created.
Yeah.
It gets worse. 3 unique molds were assigned to Stalker, Snake Eyes, and Scarlet, while the other 10 characters utilized one of 3 generic heads.
Also, they stripped Snake Eyes of all of his body accessories because they needed to cut down costs. So instead of taking little pieces off of each character, they just stripped down Snake Eyes and made him completely barren of all accessories. And that led to like the most popular character of all.
Right. Despite these limitations, the new toy line was an extreme success. With the success of the first line of toys, Hasbro expanded the line the next year with new characters and more original body part designs. In 1983,
Swivel Arm Battle Grip.
Articulation and some extra tweaks were added to the new characters and the existing figures in order to make them more posable.
God, these guys that came up with Kung Fu Grip and Swivel Arm Battle Grip, these guys were great.
Yeah, I distinctly remember having Joe's before where the arm would do that weird swivel thing.
Yeah. Well, I think I told you this. When the new Joes came out, I was about 13, I think. And I had recently had to give up my toys, because I think around 12 is about when you have to start, 12, 13, you got to start acting, you kind of think about girls and your friends pressuring you to give up your toys and blah, blah, blah. And my friend Phil, his brother Chuck, was younger than us, and he started getting all the toys. I would always go over to Phil's and be like, what's up, Chuck? What'd you get? Oh, and I'd just be like fascinated by his G.I. Joes.
Yeah,
and just
yeah.
like checking them out. Just jelly that I couldn't play.
In 1985, the base of the action figures' heads were given a ball joint, which gave the figures' heads the ability to look up and down.
Yeah, it was really good for battle because Cobra would just come get the high ground.
Or they would just crawl on their bellies and they'd be like, what's going on? What's going on?
How's the enemy keep killing us?
The years from 1983 to 85 are considered by many to be the golden years of G.I. Joe, a real American hero, as many of the most popular characters were introduced around this time. Vehicles and playsets became bigger and seemed to top the design of the previous year, culminating in 1985's impressive USS Flag playset, an aircraft carrier that measured 7.5 feet long.
It was insane. And not to mention that spaceship shuttle thing that was humongoid too. That was like the size of a giant backpack or something. And then this thing, nobody had this.
I distinctly remember seeing this in the store and being like, what the hell?
Did you want it?
No, there is no way. It was. How would you play with it? Like, it didn't make any sense to me.
It was a huge playset. You put
Not to mention, where the hell was I going to put it?
Yeah, you needed a big house. You needed a room.
A room, literally a room.
Yeah, not a lot of people got that because it was also over $100, which is a lot for a toy back then.
Oh yeah.
I think like the Millennium Falcon was like $40, and I think the Death Star PlayStation. I think it was. It was like $40 or $50 because I remember it being like, because I wanted that bad. Like
the Death
I waited.
Star set. I just have Millennium Falcon. Anyway,
I think those were about $50.
I don't think they were that expensive, but yeah. It was also late 70s, so I don't know. I mean,
Yeah. I just remember seeing the Millennium Falcon in a catalog before it came out and just obsessing over that thing until it came out. And then I saw it on the shelves and I was like, Mom! And she was like, shh, quiet. Because my stepdad was there.
Oh,
and
yeah.
she's like, quiet, get it later. And then because he couldn't know. And so I was just like dying inside knowing that it was out and I needed it.
Right.
Needed it so bad.
Had to have it.
Oh my God, I love that thing so much. That was my favorite toy, I think.
Oh, yeah.
It was my Millennium Falcon with my Han Chewie.
Right.
Oh, we had a lot of adventures.
Hasbro would continue to expand the toy line to the point of oversaturation. At one point, they had 250 different characters.
That's a lot.
Yeah, and on top of that, God knows how many accessories and vehicles and things.
Well, that's the thing, man. This was an expensive
Yeah.
toy for your kids with all the play sets.
Because that's the thing is that they've gone on record saying that the actual characters were loss leaders because it would convince them. They would lose money on those. It would convince them to buy the vehicles, which is where they actually made money.
That's where the money is.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Because they would be charging. It would probably cost maybe twice as much to make the vehicle as it does the character.
Right.
And yet they would charge $50 for it.
Yeah.
You
But
know?
they
I mean,
also,
it's like-
there was a lot of cool, like the hovercraft had depth charges.
Yeah, I mean,
and-
they were fantastic. Don't get me wrong. I mean, there was a lot of innovation, and they were definitely worth the money. But it makes sense. There was a noticeable drop in sales in 1989. The lackluster performance convinced Hasbro to scale back on production. They concentrated on the action figure lineup and reduced the number of new vehicles for that year. The characters from the Street Fighter II video game became part of the G.I. Joe lineup in 1993 as Hasbro bought the toy rights to the characters. It's around that time. It's like in TV shows when there's another kid pops up.
Yeah. Cousin Oliver.
When you start pulling in random other brands, it's like,
Yeah.
you're on your last legs there.
How did they get here?
He's like,
Transported by a video game into the G.I. Joe world.
well, you've got really long arms. That's cool. Although the line would officially end in 1994, design elements of the G.I. Joe figures and vehicles would continue in later toy lines, such as a line based on the Street Fighter motion picture, as well as another based on the game's equally popular competitor, Mortal Kombat.
A lot of these toys, these are more like these articulated toys and stuff, what held them together was just a rubber band.
Yeah.
So they didn't our little buddy up here, Buck Rogers.
Yeah.
He is cleaved in half because his rubber band popped, and so he's got 3 parts.
Right.
But that's the thing that sucks about those. It's hard to keep those.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the bands will get old,
Yeah.
and they will crack and they will
snap.
break, and
Yeah.
that's
there's
it.
really no way to restore it. That's the one thing about the Star Wars figures, because they were, hard plastic. They
Right.
I mean, you can look at these guys. They're over 40 years
I mean,
old.
and the Boba Fett looks brand new.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same thing with Melando. He's looking pretty sweet.
Another example of how I think the sales were flagging and how they were trying to bring back sales was in 1991, Hasbro brought back the 12-inch figures branded as the Hall of Fame, which they produced for 3 years.
Well, this was the beginning, too, of the collectors.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
Star Wars stuff was old enough now that people were collecting them.
It
'cause
was
they were at least 20-something years old.
'Cause it was like the late 80s when
Yeah.
Star Wars collection really took off.
So that it made sense to do, nostalgia stuff like that. But also you have to realize in the 90s, we're going from the rah-rah Reagan years to the, Clinton years, which was not
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
it was less military. We had our first president who dodged the draft, if you want to,
right.
whatever. I mean, he didn't.
He was the antithesis of Reagan, yeah.
Exactly. He was. And, for good. But yeah, so there was a different climate within, things were changing.
No, definitely. In 1995, Hasbro released the classic collection of the 12-inch figures. They sold them until 2004. G.I. Janes were reintroduced, the first female 12-inch figures in the line since 1967.
Did that coincide with the G.I. Jane movie? That
That
was in the early 90s, wasn't it?
was around that time. It's possible.
Probably. It would make sense.
I want to say it was in 95 or 96 when that came out. Yeah. For the 15th anniversary of the Real American Hero 3 3/4-inch line, Hasbro released a line exclusive to Toys R Us. Hasbro re-released the 3 3/4-inch figures for the 25th anniversary in 2007, a new series of figures for the 30th anniversary in 2011, and a new line for the 50th anniversary of the original G.I. Joe line in 2014.
Yeah, look, now it's just everywhere. People are... watch a lot of YouTubes, and the action figure collector thing is so insane. And,
it's its own little market. Yeah,
and there's these new companies too that are making licensed stuff like Hot Toys. I'm sure Hot Toys has probably done a GI Joe, or something to that effect.
Yeah.
So it's like the market for nostalgia and for toys is huge right now.
Oh yeah.
Especially action figures.
That is correct. In 2020, Hasbro released a new line of super articulated figures and vehicles similar to the Star Wars The Vintage Collection, utilizing retro-themed packaging from the 1980s. There have been countless comics, movies, TV shows, TV movies, and video games. G.I. Joe, The Rise of Cobra was released in 2009, directed by Stephen Sommers, starring Channing Tatum, Christopher Eccleston, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Oh, bad. Except for Joseph Gordon, Joe Golo was having a good time being, he was the Cobra Commander.
Yeah. It was like he was doing a Richard Dreyfuss impersonation.
And they should have Dreyfuss. I'm the Cobra Commander. I'm going to get you, sharks.
It was weird. The movie was just
bad.
Weird.
It was not good, but I did like Joe Golo as the Cobra Commander. Poor Channing Tatum. He was just
he did what he could.
Yeah, there was nothing he could do.
I mean, it just
didn't
wasn't
give him anything.
It wasn't written very well.
No, and Channing Tatum is a comedic actor. I mean, he's got the bod and the looks of and he can do Action Man or whatever.
Sure.
But he's so much better at comedy. Like I just watched Bullet Train.
Oh yeah.
And he does like a cameo in that.
Oh, does he?
And he's freaking hilarious. Like he's so likable and funny. It's just he's not. It's like Chris Pratt. It's like when you take all the humor and stuff out of him. It's just just another bland action guy.
Right.
With great abs.
After Variety had reported that G.I. Joe became a Brussels-based outfit that stands for Global Integrated Joint Operating Entity,
Joe's gone woke. Go woke, go broke.
There were reports of outrages over Paramount's alleged attempt to change the origin of G.I. Joe team. Hasbro responded on its G.I. Joe website, claiming it was not changing what the G.I. Joe brand is about, and the name G.I. Joe will always be synonymous with bravery and heroism.
Oh, yes, these make-believe toys, these make-believe stories about these make-believe plastic dolls. Oh, don't mess with the stories.
Again, this is the fans, man, the fans.
I hate fans. Toxic fandom is... I don't get it. Like, look, I love Star Wars. I didn't love the new movies, but they didn't ruin my childhood.
Sure.
I still found something to enjoy about them.
Yeah.
It's just like, if you love something... let it evolve. Let other people have a chance. Maybe it works. Maybe it doesn't. It doesn't erase everything.
I will bring up this exact conversation when they recast Indiana Jones.
I know they probably will, but that doesn't mean I have to watch it.
No.
I didn't particularly like or dislike the new Han Solo movie. I just thought it was pointless. It didn't do anything to help the character. Like, if they do an Indiana Jones movie and they pick a great actor to take the mantle,
done well,
and it's done well, I'll enjoy it. But he said the character dies with him, and I think it's not James Bond. It's not a character that's been played by a bunch of people for 50 years.
I think it could have been.
It could have been, but
now it's not. Yeah.
He's owned this character for 40 years.
Once they did Crystal Skull, that was out the window.
Yeah, and I think if they want to give, I know it's such a speed bump, but I know if they want to give Phoebe Waller-Bridgers, I don't know what the hell.
Phoebe Waller-Bridgers.
Thank you. I have so much trouble with these three named actors.
Waller-Bridger Phoebe? Yeah.
If they want to give her a new series with a new character, that's great,
I mean, that might be what they're doing. We'll see. I mean, the movie will come out.
And I've heard that they're doing another, like, young Indiana Jones series, and that's fine. I say... do it animated and get a guy that sounds like Harrison Ford.
Sure.
God,
they've been doing that with Star Wars for a long time.
Yeah, Lego Star Wars and all that stuff. I mean, it's I don't know. I don't know how we got on this with G.I. Joe.
It was me.
But
sorry. It was just because of toxic fandom, that's all.
Yes. But I'm not going to start writing comments and dissertations about how I hate Star Wars now, or it's like
this is what kills me is that people like this. It's like the new movie's coming out and they've changed everything. Okay, it didn't take away your cartoons.
No.
It didn't take away your action figures. It's not like the police came in and rounded everything up and said this is what it is now.
Nothing can ruin your childhood except for you and your stepdad.
Sending your toys to the dump. Yeah. Anyway, they were very much about the movie. That Hasbro was saying it was to be a modern retelling of the G.I. Joe versus Cobra storyline based out of the pit as they were throughout the 1980s comic book series.
I mean, there's so much there. It's crazy that they didn't have one already.
Well, that's what I don't know why it took till 2009 for them to release the movie.
Probably some rights issue, or they probably had it in development forever.
Probably,
different writers.
yeah.
I mean,
it's amazing any movie ever gets made ever.
Tell me about it.
A sequel followed in 2013, G.I. Joe Retaliation, adding in stars Dwayne Johnson, Ray Stevenson, and Bruce Willis.
Didn't make it any better.
Nope.
Didn't make it any better.
It got worse.
Made it a little worse, yes.
A third movie was announced shortly after the release of Retaliation, but has been slow to develop. A reboot of sorts was released in 2021, Snake Eyes G.I. Joe Origins.
Whatever happened to that? Did it come out?
It did. It was supposed to come out in 2020, and then the pandemic happened, and it came out in 2021. And I don't know if it's on any streaming services. Yeah. I've never seen it.
I had no idea that movie came out.
I want to say I think I might have scrolled past it on Tubi at one point. So
maybe. When you're on a plane.
That's very possible.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know. It could be interesting.
It has no actors I've ever heard of. From what I saw, I've never heard of the writer. I've never heard of the director.
But you heard of Snake Eyes.
I've heard of Snake Eyes. That is true. Overall, the three films have grossed $705 million.
It's so sad. There's just it's just sad.
I mean, the fact is that if they would just do these better, they would make so much money.
Well, it doesn't take a lot to make them better. It takes some humor, a little bit of character development. Look at the Marvel movies. You know, they do a good job of balancing out a huge chunk of people and making it good. Yeah. Interesting.
I mean, it's a huge, unwieldy beast, and they still manage to make it entertaining.
And there's fun. And there's a lot of really good source material. The actual comics are great.
A really good, to me, the 1987 TV animated movie was better than all of the live-action movies.
I got to check that out. I don't remember that.
It is. Don Johnson's in it.
Well, I must have seen it.
Amazing.
Must have seen it because I was a huge Don Johnson fan, and I still to this day watch cartoons.
Yeah.
I mean, if they had Saturday morning cartoons, I would watch them. I even try to watch animated things on Saturday morning.
Nice.
Just to kind of get back into the childhood groove. But yeah, I mean, I get it could have been really cool because Bruce Willis is totally perfect for playing, Hawk or whatever the guy's name is, General G.I. Joe. I don't know.
I don't know which character he played.
But he was like Duke, right?
I think he played Duke, actually.
Yeah, and Duke was like the guy.
Duke
the blonde,
was the head guy. Yeah.
So he's a good pick for Duke, and there's some good. Yeah. It's just they don't. It's these type of movies that just get decided by committee.
Yeah.
And the execs get way too involved and. Hey guys.
Hey Bob.
Hey, I just want to let you guys know that I was part of the G.I. Joe team, and my suggestion was just let's just get rid of the action. Let's get rid of the action. Let's get rid of the relationships, and let's just make it like a bunch of dolls are on screen.
A bunch of pictures of dolls on screen.
Yeah, they were like cool.
Did they run with that?
They did.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, it was awful.
All right, thanks for stopping by.
Not as awful as I am as a father.
Hey, I think your kids are playing with dolls.
Okay, I gotta get out of here.
Well, thanks for stopping by.
He's old school.
Bob. Yeah. I think the big thing for me is that with those live movies, none of them were better than the stories I came up with.
No, and they were bloated and convoluted and silly, and they just didn't make sense. It's just they put too much crap into these movies. It's like, you know what would have been a great G.I. Joe movie? Falcon and the Winter Soldier, or what is that? Winter Soldier, or
the Captain America Winter Soldier.
Captain America Winter Soldier. That is a G.I. Joe movie.
Yeah, I mean, really, the Captain America storyline, that section of the Marvel universe is really the closest you can come to G.I. Joe.
Right, and Marvel did G.I. Joe comics, so it's like they could even fold G.I. Joe into Marvel if they wanted to, and make it pick 5 great characters and make them the G.I. Joe team and bring them in to help.
Yeah, I mean, they could do TV shows and all this. I mean, they could do a ton of stuff.
Yeah, give us the product. Listen to us. We got 8 pitches.
So there were a total of 6 animated TV shows in addition to the animated TV movie we already talked about. They were
G.I. Joe, a real American hero from 1983 to 1986. G.I. Joe, a real American hero from 1989 to 1992. G.I. Joe Extreme, animated series which ran from 1995 to 1997. G.I. Joe Sigma 6, 2005 animated series. G.I. Joe Resolute in 2009, and G.I. Joe Renegades in 2010.
Yeah, that was when they were really. I remember when the Sigma 6 line came out because I was a friend of mine would always go to Toys R Us, kind of like with the DVDs and stuff. He would go like every Thursday or Friday in the morning and like grab figures.
He was
and
an
stuff.
adult collector?
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
But I remember I would go with him quite a bit. We'd work at Warner Brothers together, and I'd go with him before we'd go to work. And man, yeah, the Sigma 6, all that stuff, I was just like, why? Because he had an entire closet that was just full of carded action figures.
That's crazy.
I was like, you don't even look at them. They just get stuffed in a closet.
Yeah, I guess it's his retirement plan.
Yeah. 6 video games have been released. G.I. Joe Cobra Strike in 1983 by Parker Brothers for the Atari 2600 and Intellivision.
I remember that.
G.I. Joe A Real American Hero, the video game, 1985 by Epix for the Apple II and the Commodore 64.
Don't think I had that.
This is the thing. I don't know which one it was, and I looked at footage of both of these because there are playthroughs on YouTube. You can watch gameplay. I had a friend, my friend Chris Perillo, who I was friends with the whole family. Ben was the one I was closest to, but he was huge into like computers at a very young age.
Nice.
And still is. He makes a ton of money off of doing computer stuff. But he had a G.I. Joe game, and I loved it. I loved playing it. I think it was the one from Epix in 85, because I think it was a Commodore 64 we were playing it on.
Nice.
But watching the footage, I was like, this doesn't look anything like I remember.
No. Well, it's like, I mean, I used to love Ultima and Ultima 2.
Yeah.
And in my mind, it was a really awesome game.
Right.
But looking at it, it was pretty simple.
In 1991, there was the G.I. Joe, the NES by Taxon. In 1992, G.I. Joe, the arcade game by Konami.
That was kind of like, that was just basically a Contra ripoff.
Yeah. G.I. Joe, the Atlantis Factor, also in 1992 by Capcom for the Nintendo Entertainment System.
The Atlantis Factor. Joe, we're going underwater.
G.I. Joe, the Rise of Cobra, the video game in 2009 by EA based on the movie.
I haven't played any of those.
Didn't play that at all. And that's it. That's been it for the video games, which is also surprising.
It
You'd
is
think
weird.
that there would be way more video games.
Now, they should do a G.I. Joe video game where it takes place in their toys. You know, like a small soldiers type of deal.
Like the Hot Wheels Unleashed. Yeah.
Exactly. So you can like play, you know, there's the kitchen
a really good
battles,
idea.
there's the backyard
Yeah.
battle, you know, and you have access to all the play sets and the, you know, the different vehicles, but you have to go get them out of the box or something. I don't know. It would be really fun.
That would be cool.
Yeah. I would totally buy that video game.
G.I. Joe
And
was...
you could have the big Kung Fu grip G.I. Joes come in and like,
the big,
it's like
the big
a boss
12-inch
monster.
ones,
Yeah,
you
like a
unlock
boss-
them. G.I. Joe was inducted into the National Toy Hall of Fame at the Strong in Rochester, New York in 2004 and into the Pop Culture Hall of Fame in 2017.
Again, it seems weird that it would take so long.
I mean, well, I think the National Toy Hall of Fame has not been around. I don't think it was around much before that. But yeah, they're huge. I mean, like I said at the beginning, at one point they had over $2 billion in sales in 1 year. Like it's crazy how insanely popular these were.
Well, and also your grandpa, your dad, and you could have all played with G.I. Joes, different eras, different types.
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
very true.
You still can play with brand new G.I. Joes today, 60 years later.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty good test of time. Like all these toys that we were coming up with that were telling their story this month, they all have longevity.
Yeah.
And I mean, some it doesn't make any sense. Nerf is crazy to me. Nerf that's 60 years old and keeps evolving is crazy to me, but just fascinating and awesome. You know,
It fulfills a need you didn't know you had, Jim.
but you know, Hot Wheels and G.I. Joe totally makes sense because you know, kids love cars and kids love war.
we're
You know,
car
like
culture
playing
and-
army.
We're a car and military culture for
Yes,
sure.
I love a toy that spans generations and evolves and adapts and
Yes.
becomes something
Yes.
new. And
And G.I. Joe definitely did that.
yeah, and G.I. Joe has a great story to tell, and I think we need the video game we talked about
Yeah.
because I think that I want to play it. and I think we'd need an new animated series or movie
yeah.
that's still fun. The one thing that I thought was kind of interesting is Hama, who was a vet, when the series came out, he thought it was morally bankrupt because nobody died.
Right.
Because in the comics, people died.
Yes.
And he was like, how can you have a
Right,
war-based toy where nobody dies?
I always, when I was growing up and watching
yeah,
it, I
all of us.
always was like, what? Everybody's shooting at everybody and no one's getting hit?
The plane blows up, and then the 2 parachutes come
Yeah,
down,
yeah.
and the car blows up, and this was everything back then. Like, you watched A-Team, and the car would blow up and roll 75 times, and guys would get out and be like, kind of a little wobbly, and like, oh, wow, that was crazy. Nobody,
You couldn't, it was much more restricted.
when they started actually killing people in cartoons and stuff, it was shocking and awesome because it gave it a sense of realism and drama that you didn't have. There were no stakes in the old G.I. Joe. They were fun adventure shows, but you knew nobody was going to die, good or bad.
Well, that's what I loved about the TV movie, because in the one in '87, which I think was proof of concept for the later show that came out in '89, but it was way higher. Like, I believe at least one Joe died.
Maybe, because they did. It was probably PG.
I mean, and they eventually broke it up and showed it on TV.
Yeah.
But it was on TV anyway. But I remember when it premiered. But it was definitely higher stakes.
Yeah, but the Cobra is the only organization that are worse shots than stormtroopers.
That's true.
I remember seeing a shot, and there's just 1,000, because it was always like these laser bolts in the Joe. They weren't like real bullets.
No, they were, because you had to see them. Yeah.
And just the screen is filled with these green. It's like a video game. You're bouncing off everything except for the 2 Joes.
Yeah, they're
missed
there
them completely.
Yep.
And then they're just like pew pew with their little stun guns, beep beep, and then
They would pop them out and they'd be done.
Then they'd show like a little thing over their head, swirly to show that they're knocked out and not dead.
Not dead. Yeah. Well, the third sequel is happening still. The third live action movie. It's still in development, so it's very possible it'll come out in the next couple of years.
Well, let's hope that they give it to a cool filmmaker who loves the toy and wants to tell a fun story.
Yes.
And, I still think it should be maybe animated. I think you need to hit the toy part and not make it a military thing. I think the problem with the G.I. Joe movies is they made it too military and tried to make it... There was a weird tone to it because it was fantastical with the costumes and the vehicles and the being able to run, a million miles an hour. And I think you had one of the Wayans brothers was in it or somebody to be the comic relief. But you can't take it so seriously, and they took it way too seriously in tone. And I think you have to have fun with it and lean into how wacky it was and make it like an 80s movie. You gotta, let's put it in that era, and have that fun time of like, oh, here's this ragtag group of, warriors in the 80s that President Reagan is calling upon. We need Joe. It's like you could have so much fun with it. And that's the thing, that with these kind of things, with these toys and stuff, you don't make a gritty retelling of war.
Yeah.
You have a big, goofy, fun, costumey thing to have the joy of the toy. If you're going to make a TV, if you're going to make a show or a movie about it, you have to have the joy of the toy.
I think a lot of it with the first movie was around the time when Christopher Nolan had his first Batman movie come out, and everybody wanted to make things more real and gritty and dark and and it just doesn't work for G.I. Joe.
No, because Joe is fun, and I mean, all the characters are weird and wacky and colorful.
Yeah, it's bright colors.
Yeah, and it's just, you could have so much fun with it. I mean, if you did like a hybrid comedy adventure, and you didn't. The Joes weren't in on the joke, but the audience is in on the joke.
Right.
You're going to have a lot of fun, and you could still have, a great action adventure movie.
Yeah.
But just don't take yourself so damn seriously, and have fun with the fact that all the Cobra people are bad shots, and have fun with the fact that it's like we're at war, but nobody dies. I think so often that, like you said, people are looking to create something within the moment of what's going on in cinema, rather than embracing the joy and the fun of what what they're making a movie about.
Right.
And if you're not making, if you make a G.I. Joe Vietnam movie, well, that's no fun. Okay? Joe, Diddy Mao, playing Russian roulette. Hey, you want to know how I got my scar? We don't want that. We don't need it.
No.
Have some fun. Give us a fun Joe movie because we love G.I. Joe.
Yeah. Thanks for listening. We're out of time. We'll be back next week with some Lego.
Oh, baby. Lego. Oh.
Move the diametrically opposite of G.I. Joe, which is to build things.
Yes.
And with Lego and construct.
Yeah. We'll be back. Go, Joe. Fight against the evil Gore King of the Terror. Oh, Jesus Christ. Hold on. This is a toughie. We now return you to your regularly scheduled programming. What's happening? Already in progress.